Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Jonah Wish here. I would love to introduce two members from the organization REN-ISAC here with us today to talk about what they offer and what they can do for you and our country and our higher ed organization. So we have Michael Davis, a principal security engineer from REN-ISAC, and Kim Milford, the executive director of REN-ISAC. So with that, Kim, I'll pass it off to you to get us started, and we'll take it from there.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. We're happy to be here. As Jonah said, we are the REN-ISAC. That's probably the longest, I don't think it's the longest ISAC name, but it's nice and long. Research and Education Networks Information Sharing and Analysis Center is our full name. And I'll get into our mission here in a few slides and talk more about that. Jonah also introduced us. Here are our email addresses if you want to reach out to us. And then you can see a lot of our public resources that we'll be spotlighting in this presentation at this web address at the top, www.renisac.net. You got to kind of look around a little bit because there's a lot there. So definitely take a look. A few caveats. I talk really fast and I get really excited about this stuff. So please bear with me. Another caveat is while we do most of our resources targeted towards research and education, we hope they're useful to more people. And whenever we do a resource for our members, I always ask our analysts and our engineers, can we do a public version? Because usually that doesn't take too much, that we have the, we can rewrite something. We can take some confidentiality out of it or some TLP read materials out of it and make it available publicly. So we do try to think more publicly and also regarding low cost, low barrier entries, we're looking broadly at the sweep of what's available out there. And I have a slide at the end to talk about that a little bit. So I forewarned you, here's our mission. And there's a couple really important pieces about this. Research and higher education. That it's not just higher ed. That's an important part. And many people are CISOs or work in the security office of higher ed institutions. And maybe they also do research. And by research, it tends to be high research that's done from grants, from private corporations or from governments. Governmental entities. So it's that level of research. Now, what we saw, I'm trying to remember when, mid 2000, so 2005, 2006, that the research institutions at higher ed, at universities and colleges, were getting major threats to them, directly to them, trying to get that research data. So we know the research is valuable in its own right. Higher ed has a lot of valuable data about our students, our faculty and staff, but that research data is a separate sort of targeted thing that we have to pay attention to. So I don't want to minimize the research part of that. We operate much like the other ISACs, but I'm just segueing into my next slides here, where we do information sharing, we facilitate information sharing with our members, and we gather information from all these sources and get that to our members in ways that it's targeted and helpful for them. And sometimes we have to chunk it up because it's just too much information or things are happening too fast, so we have to slow it down. We were established in 2003, one of the original ISACs. And what happened was the vice president at the time of information technology at Indiana University saw that research and education was not represented in the national infrastructure, the critical infrastructure. And so he went to contact the US government and said, we really feel like this is a gap and we're going to miss out on things. So they authorized us to get started as a subsector of the critical infrastructure. We are a subsector of the public sector, which doesn't really fit because we have private institutions too, but it's close enough. We can make it work. So with that, we were established in 2003. We are a member of the National Council of ISACs, and we often represent research and education to U.S. government. I sit in on summits all the time with the FBI, talking about mainly nation state actors and what we can do, especially around that research, that targeted research things. We have 700 member institutions. Going back to the member of National Council of ISACs, I want to say there are 25 other members of it, including the Space ISAC, which I know is related to NCC. So they're doing some great things over there. We're really excited to see their work. And I have a couple examples from some of the other ISACs, because the inter-ISAC sharing is really good. Oh, sorry. And there's a slide that I wasn't planning on. I just had them in the wrong order. The REN-ISAC has members from Australia, Canada, New Zealand, United States, and United Kingdom. And we have a couple exceptions from Switzerland that we let in because they had enough research overlap with the higher ed institutions or the research institutions that it made sense. We have 3,000 member reps from those 700 institutions, and we maintain that with a full-time staff of about 16 plus interns. We love our interns. So back to the ISACs. This is from the page of the National Council of ISACs. You can see their publications. They don't publish terribly frequently, but we do meet frequently. We meet monthly, we compare stories. We always meet. CISA is always at that meeting, and then other agencies from the government might also come if they have something to share or to talk about. So it's really a valuable resource for us, which then we can feed down to our members, and we're valuable to each other. I was recently asking about that. The White House had a summit on cybersecurity workforce development earlier this week. So I asked the other directors of the National Council of ISAC, hey, what are you guys seeing about this? And they're all getting me information. And that's what we try to do, is we're facilitating that information sharing across our sectors. This is a YouTube video that is part of the advancements series of videos that Ted Danson hosts. And this is featuring the IT ISAC. And I think they were one of the first ISACs. So they're very, they're the most experienced of us, and they're sort of central, right? Because IT services is central to a lot of what we're talking about. So they have a really good perspective and a really great depth of experience. So this is a really fun YouTube video, and I'll provide these slides when we're done, so you don't have to copy that URL if you don't want to. But it's a really fun way to look at the ISACs and the IT ISAC in particular. And then I just wanted to, none of my pictures are coming through here. I just wanted to point out another information share that we received from the Health ISAC. Health ISAC is doing a lot of research around authentication. We know credential theft is still a huge deal across all sectors. If we didn't know it before, if you read the Verizon data breach incident report, it's all over in there that credentials are a big thing. So these are the key takeaways from this really nice guide they put together for CISOs. The sources at the bottom, and just it's things. If you've been working in security, you probably already know this, but we know that passwords alone aren't enough. So we're all moving towards multi-factor and looking at different ways we can do that. And this just provides some of the key takeaways from that report. Michael, I'm going to kick it over to you.
All right. Hey, we got a picture on this one too.
Yes.
So, Kim has mentioned a couple times the information sharing portion of what we do and why that's so important. And if you take a look at the acronym, the IS, the information sharing, is the first part of the ISAC, right? So we tend to focus on that. And I think it's important anytime you talk about that sharing of information, especially among a large group, as large as ours that you have seen that's become so large now with over 700 member institutions, we have to have a framework, some guidelines around how we share that information, a common lexicon that everybody can sort of use and abide by. And this is one of the things that when you first become a member representative with REN-ISAC, one of the first things you have to do is you have to read through and agree to abide by our information sharing policy. And what we've done, there's an international group out there of incident responders and security teams called FIRST, and they have developed what I think is this really intuitive framework for marking information on how you can reshare it. And so because it uses this color coordination of traffic light colors, it makes it sort of intuitive, right? And so the most widely redistributable things are those that are TLP white. And as you see, as the colors increase, it restricts your ability to reshare information, with TLP red being the most restrictive. And so we all sort of come together and we decide this is what we're going to agree to use as we share information. And that's the same with REN-ISAC. And when we think about sharing information, we think about it predominantly in two separate ways. We think about that in human to human and machine to machine. Kim, if you want to hit the next slide. And then on the following slide again after that. So if we think about how we share information person to person, what does that look like? So we a lot of times will develop products within the REN-ISAC. So those are the staff, those 16 full-time members and interns that Kim talked about earlier. Well, we develop some sort of information product that's intended to help inform or educate our member representatives, the other people, the other staff at their institutions, and sometimes the public based on the information sharing protocol, right? And so some of the criteria for our sharing those products and information are going to be very familiar to you if you've heard of the SMART objectives or SMART goals before. We look at, is this information accurate? Is this information relevant to our members? So Kim's talked a lot about research and higher education. So how targeted is that information for our members? Is it actionable? Can you do something with it? The vast majority of our member community are operational security professionals. This is what they're doing every day. They're down there in the trenches, they're frontline, they're getting the work done. And so it has to be actionable for them. And then the fourth thing we kind of think about is this information timely? We move so fast in this field and things change so rapidly that even a few weeks, months old, sometimes it's not timely, it's not relevant anymore. And so we have to gauge across all those things before sharing. Now, I will say we tend to probably overshare, even if it doesn't necessarily meet all four of those criteria, because that's the business we're in. That's that IS in ISAC, right? We're in the business of information sharing, and we take that responsibility seriously. Our members, we know, are capable of filtering out information if they don't feel like it's relevant to them. But for example, we may come across credential dumps on the dark web, and we have no idea how old those accounts may be, or if those accounts were ever real. And so what we might do is we might package those up and send those out to the potentially impacted institutions, regardless if we're aware of how old those or how legitimate those credentials are. And then once they're in the hands of those institutions, let them decide, say, oh, these are years old, these are probably not things we need to worry about, or yes, this definitely could be an issue. Let's take a closer look. But then there are also times that REN-ISAC, we have to get out of the way and we let the professionals do the sharing. And that's this second sort of spoke to spoke idea, where these operational security professionals are doing the sharing themselves. And we facilitate that, by email distribution lists, or by Slack workspaces, or by our members portal that you have to have a REN-ISAC member login to get access to see things in our members wiki. And those, again, might be protected by that TLP and then information we're sharing restrictions. And the types of things that come up on those discussion lists, for example, might be, somebody asks, is anybody else out there decrypting your network traffic? Are you doing it inbound? Are you doing it outbound? How worthwhile has that been? Have you seen benefits from doing that? And then that community really comes together in that, and I think this is one of the most valuable pieces of our community, is that organic discussion that comes up as a result of that, where people from hundreds of different institutions will chime in and say, we're mostly decrypting only inbound stuff, but we're thinking about maybe doing security in the middle for outbound stuff that's in high risk areas, or we're trying to balance privacy concerns with the security concerns, or we might have to get into the technical details. They might talk about, we also have to weigh whether our security protection devices and appliances are capable of handling if we start shunting all of our network traffic through those. And do we have to think about increased bandwidth, so on and so forth, including potential projected costs. So there's some really good discussion that comes up around a lot of those things that are practical and important and relevant to our community that comes from the community themselves. And so we talked about.
Let me just add something there, Michael.
Yeah, go ahead.
And so it's full circle, right? That then once, if there's a lot of discussion about a particular issue, cyber insurance, everyone is stressing with it, struggling with their questionnaires, getting denied coverage, premiums are going up. So quite a bit of discussion about that. So if we see there's a churn on our mailing lists or our channels, then we might take that back and write up an analysis report on it. That then a person can go to one place and find all the information about what's already been shared versus having to look at 200 emails or something like that. So, it's kind of a fun cyclical that way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And sometimes what we'll do too is we've talked about these different TLP levels. We might have one version of a document that is restricted to our community because there's certain specific details in there. And then we might edit that, like Kim mentioned earlier, take some of that information out, try to leave as much as we can in there, and then maybe post that on the public website and mark it TLP white for wider redistribution, wider sharing. So on to the next slide, this idea of C certifications. I mentioned that briefly when I talked about the credential dump, but we come across various sorts of intelligence, sometimes threat intelligence, sometimes open source intelligence that's useful to deliver to these institutions. And not all of them are member institutions of the REN-ISAC. So we are the official computer security incident response team for US higher education, which means regardless of your membership in REN-ISAC, we will still, if we have an accurate current abuse notification contact for your institution, we'll still attempt to notify you on important relevant information that we get. So sometimes that's those credential dumps. Sometimes it's, for example, compromised hosts. And we do a lot of those types of notifications. We could talk a little bit more about those. Kim, if you want to hit the next slide, we can kind of break that down by notification type over the past few years. And so you can see of the various notifications that we've sent out as part of that public good as the USC cert, we have compromised machines, those compromised host notifications going out, or the credentials that we talked about. And you'll see that not a lot necessarily changes from year to year, but sometimes based on what's going on in the world, there are shifts inside these numbers. And so you can see, for example, in 2020, spam phish almost twice as high, right, as it was in 2021. Well, if we think about the global event that happened in 2020, in terms of the COVID pandemic, when everybody went work from home, we saw a significant increase in phishing during that time. So it makes sense that these numbers would sort of represent what we saw going on. And then we can break that down even further on the next slide in terms of compromised machines, what we're seeing out there. And so here's an example of the number of recent notifications that we've sent about different types of malware on these infected hosts. And there's a lot of stuff going on here, and that's okay, Kim, if you hit the next slide like you did there, we can kind of highlight what we're looking at here. It's not necessarily just the number of notifications that we're sending, but take a look at the years that these particular strains of malware were first discovered. You've got a 2007, a 2008, the next one I think is a 2010. These aren't even necessarily in this decade, or in some cases, the previous decade, right? These are not new threats. And so what this tells us is that we still have a lot of opportunity to continue to get the word out about the importance of patching machines frequently and protecting those machines and how to do that. And so we continue to try to get the word out with these reactive notifications. But then on the opposite side of that, as we keep talking about these proactive intelligence documents that we develop and we send out to our community, we want to make that available so that over time, we really see these numbers not only decrease in terms of notifications, but then decrease in terms of how old the malware strains are that we're sending notifications about.
So a word on this and that in general. Thank you, Michael. I was really curious about Conficker because we always have a ton of Conficker out in our communities that we do notifications about. And so I was asking some community security group, and they said, well, it's the healthcare institutions. They have equipment that the vendor uses an old operating system that still is susceptible to Conficker. And so that was kind of an aha moment, right? And I figured there was something like that. So now we're talking with the Health ISAC about, can we write something for how to secure your endpoints against these old, legacy systems that are still open to things like Conficker. And we saw, again, I'm going to refer to the Verizon data breach incident report, that endpoints, servers, and workstations, malware that they're getting is still a very big deal. So that the credentials are, I think, are the two biggest things we're dealing with right now.
And sometimes I think it's helpful to understand where this information comes from as well. We don't have visibility into any of these networks. What we do is we work with partners who, for example, there was a very recent takedown, speaking of Health ISAC, as they cooperated with Microsoft, and Microsoft's attorneys went to the DOJ, I believe, issued an injunction, said we've got this botnet that's worldwide. It's causing a lot of monetary damages for our constituents. And they were able to commandeer, take over that formerly malicious infrastructure. When they take that over, then they now can see all those malware infected hosts that are out there that are talking back to that formerly malicious infrastructure. And then they can use that information and pass it on to groups like the ISACs and say, hey, look, this indicates that these hosts in this IP space were infected or are infected with that strain of malware. And so then we can use that to go back to the institutions and target those notifications. Now, does that mean that that particular malware now, if it's in the hands of the good guys, is still bad? Well, not necessarily, but it tends to be that if you have a machine that's been infected with one thing, the bad folks, the adversaries that are out there, these criminals, are not just leaving it like that, right? They're dropping other strains of malware on there too. So typically there's not a single infection on a machine when we see this sort of thing. So it's worthwhile to go investigate and see not only how you can clean up that host, but see if, again, if there are any other mitigations, protections, defenses that you can put in place that would have prevented that to begin with. So if you want to advance a couple slides, we've talked about the person to person. We've talked about the hub to spoke, how REN-ISAC facilitates that. What about this machine to machine? What exactly is that? How does that work? What does that look like? And so many years ago, probably over a decade ago, we recognized among our community the need to try to quickly share indicators, threat indicators among our constituents. How do we say, oh, this one IP address is attacking us over here at institution A, and then get that information to institutions B, C, and D, so that they can go ahead and proactively defend themselves against it? Or malware with file hash has impacted institution X. How do we get it to institutions Y and Z? And so this was the answer for us at the time. We actually built within the REN-ISAC a threat intelligence threat indicator platform that we continue to develop and maintain today. And we host as sort of a software as a service for our member community to take advantage of. And so it's what we do is we compile tons and tons of information about these threat indicators from myriad sources. And those sources can be third-party data sources that are open source. Some of those are through private info sharing data collaborations where we have vendors, we have partners, we have people widely respected in our space that are doing research on this and collecting intelligence, and they are graciously sharing that information with us, allowing us to redistribute it within our closed member community. And then what I'm most proud of, I think, is that we have a lot of the submissions within this threat intelligence platform that we call CES come from other participating research and higher ed institutions within the REN-ISAC membership. And in fact, last time I checked, some of the stats on this were we get about 5 million unique indicators per quarter is what we averaged in 2021. And that's across all of our different types. So IPv4 addresses, V6 addresses, and file hashes, and email addresses. And of those, we use a confidence scale 0 to 10 to represent how confident we are that something is tagged appropriately. The high confidence things, what we consider the 8 to 10 on that 0 to 10 scale, we had 35% of those come from participating research and education institutions. I think that's really cool because it speaks to the collaboration that our community is not only doing, but shows their willingness to continue to contribute back to others, which is really the spirit of academia, right? When everything got stood up, it was about the openness and the sharing, and they continue. Our information security teams across higher ed and research continue to reflect those values and how they try to protect the entire community. And so what you see here is how that information gets funneled into CES, and then how we redistribute that back out to our community based on things like confidence and things like how we tag those things. And so we have recommendations and allow them to pull feeds from that so that those then can get fed into their protection devices at their institutions. And that is all automated. And so if you have a Fortinet, if you have a Palo Alto, if you have a whatever, right, we have written guides and documentation, plugins in many instances to help facilitate getting this back out in an automated way from the collection that we have into the hands of those security professionals so that it makes it easier to protect their institutions. And I think that's a really cool thing that we get to do. And I think, Kim, do you want to take it back over on that one?
Yep. So thanks for setting me up so well, Michael, because Michael talked about the information sharing piece and he was getting into analysis. SES is both. SES is the information and the analysis. That confidence is a critical factor so that people can make decisions about what to do in their home institution. And that's part of the analysis we bring. So these are more analysis reports from here on out, or analysis services that I wanted to focus on. This is our public resource, our advisories that we put together, and we don't do too many advisories. There are other folks that do a lot, and we tend not to do product related advisories. Like we're not going to do one every time it's Microsoft patch day, right? That they're doing that, and we would just be providing information that they're providing. We'd be a pass through. So we'll just let them do that. So these are some of them that we have done recently. Actually, it dropped from this list, but we did one last year on ransomware. It was somewhat general. Like usually we try to be very operational, as Michael said, but it was a little more general than that. But we were able to pull in, Michael really went through it, and he was able to pull in information that we were seeing from the CSIRT activity and from SES and make it more meaningful operationally about what some specifics were around that. So that's a really good one. And it's still, I mean, ransomware is still huge and it's still very relevant. So like I said, it dropped from this list, but it was last year that we put that together. I want to say last spring. And then, tension in Ukraine, that's a little more general too. It's not as operational, but people were wondering what they could do. We kept hearing, what's going on? What do we need to know? And so we put something together so people could use that internally or share it with other people that they thought it might be helpful for. So our alerts and advisories are critical. They are almost always public. We might get it to our members first and give them a few days with it and have some discussion around it, maybe have a webinar about it, and then we'll make it public and post it on our website. We do a daily situational awareness report. It's called the Daily Watch. It is always, when we do our member survey, it's one of the most favorite products. Someone used to always tell me that he would start his day with coffee in the Daily Watch, because it usually goes out in the afternoon. So he would read the next day. Really, it's just a compilation of targeted open source news, available media, about what's going on. But again, it's targeted. So our analysts here, you can see some of the analysts named at the top, Cheryl, Jen, and Ivan. They go through hundreds and hundreds of pieces of media every day, and they find the ones that are the best telling of the story, because maybe you see Microsoft warns about this brute force attack in this one from from May. So they'll read several on that, and they'll say, this is the most pertinent piece for our members, or it's the best written piece, or it has the most information. So hundreds and hundreds of information, then they bring it down to a couple pages. It is not an easy read. It is if you just read the headline and the couple of lines under it. But if you want to go into each of these articles, that's what you're doing all day. Now, some SOCs have people that go through it as part of their SOC activities so that they can start looking for those trends and those threats. So some people do that, but most of us don't have time if we're also responding to incidents and doing proactive security pieces. So you can just read the highlights in this way. At the end, we also have events and webinars and podcasts. So that's another really helpful way to get information. If you're interested in this and you're not a REN-ISAC member, we do have a friends and family ad. So you can request to be added to it, and we'll accommodate that request. It's very manual. We might try to figure out better ways to do that, but for now, we're happy to provide the information to you if you want it. This is another type of how we do analysis. This is in our member wiki. So you would have to be a member to have access to this, but you can see we look at common threats and we start documenting everything that's available on that. Some of it is from Microsoft in this case, some of it is from the US government. So we'll put together a compendium, a growing compendium of all the information we have on the vulnerability, the CVE, and make that available. And then we're updating it constantly. And then there's usually a horizon, so for Log4Shell, Log4j, whichever you want to call it. There was, it had a long tail. So we started reporting on it and then it just kept growing and growing and growing. So we just kept adding to it. And so this is what we call our developing issues page for our members. And so if members want to find out what's going on with this, or what are the things I need to be have on my horizon, they can come to this page and get a little bit smarter about it. Another way we do analysis and sharing is through collaborations partners. We are super proud of our partners, and they're changing all the time. New people are adding all the time, and we have different styles of partnerships. Some of them are, sponsor our member meeting. Yeah, well, you can do that, and you can come and talk about your products and things like that. Other ones are more in depth. With SANS, we have a very in-depth relationship, and they offer discounted online services, not their in-person services, discounted online services to research and education, including K-12s, including university-related healthcare members. Anyone, they're very broad in that offering. And then we help to promote it, and we actually receive a revenue share back from them on that. So that keeps feeding the REN-ISAC so we can provide more services. And like I said, some of them are just sponsors. We also have these partnerships. EDUCAUSE Internet 2 are examples of partnerships, but aren't sponsorships. We just have a lot in common with them. Our members are very common. If they're an EDUCAUSE member, they might be a REN-ISAC member, or Internet 2 is the same way. And they share good resources. So we're constantly looking at those resources, helping them develop those resources, and maybe saying, oh, this was good, but let us write the operational piece of it. So we're just always working with them too. And then the list along the side are other, I don't know what you call them, alliances we have. As you can see, we have alliances with several SOCs, with the global NOC, which is hosted at Indiana University too. And they do great network services out to 20-some different networks. So they're a good partner because they're seeing things, or they can help get the word out for us if there's something an emergency. So, we're always looking for ways we can make these partnerships better and make the information from these partnerships available to our members and to the public if we can do that. So, again, it's more of that information sharing. I wanted to talk a little bit about additional services that we haven't talked about so far, because ours was definitely focused on the information sharing and analysis. We offer assessments out to universities, colleges, and even research centers or partner centers. Maybe it's a service provider who provides only to higher ed, then we would offer, we've done assessments there. And the cool thing about our assessment service is that we use peers, we use people who are security professionals to do the assessment. So it is not going to be slick. Let me just tell you that right now. It's not, we're not, Price, who is it now? PwC, is that their initials these days? I can't keep track of them. We're not them, but it's going to be, it's operationally focused. How many times have we said that? And it's going to be, you really need to, you're using multi-factor authentication for these audiences, but you need to use it for your students too, or for your researchers too, or things like that. So just really kind of down in the depths, like how to do your organization better, how to do your technical security better. And then we'll focus on things that they want to focus on. So if they want to focus on incident response and do a deep dive, we'll do that. If they want to do a penetration test, we'll do that. That's where Michael's been the most involved in the peer the peer assessment service. And one of the folks who was just recently assessed was like, yeah, and they found a 0 day and now we're all good, so he was super happy about the service. So it's really interesting that we offer the service so you can be an assessee and an assessor, and people are both. So one of the assessors is now having his institution assessed. So I love to see that sort of, growing the program. We've done several, a couple dozen now. So we're starting to see some trends that we'll be reporting on and things like that. Cybersecurity education is big for us too. I mentioned the SANS discounts we can do. And another thing with the SANS discount, we buy, so you buy the credits to do these online courses. And then we buy a number of the credits. So if you just want to take one course, you can sub buy it through us and not buy it directly from SANS. So that's another opportunity that we can make that SANS training available. SANS training is expensive, but it is really good training. So we're super proud of the partnership, and they keep evolving it. Now they're doing more summits. I attended a ransomware summit, and I'm attending a blockchain summit in the fall. So, and those are free. So they're offering more of that sort of thing too, which is helpful. We have a monthly webinar series. It might be the latest on a threat or latest from a partner or what we're finding. I think, Michael, didn't you do one recently on CES?
We got one coming up on CES.
Coming up, okay. And then we host workshops. We haven't done any workshops this year. We kind of took a breather from them, but we did 3 workshop series over the 3 prior years. One of them was on having a contentious speaker on campus. And these workshops were really focused on physical plus cyber, or cyber plus physical, because they are blended. Our threats are blended now. We cannot have one without the other. Even a hurricane has cyber impact now. So we need to think of them collectively, cohesively, and not as one or the other. And the workshops are very focused on that. So we had the contentious speaker on campus. The second year we had was a pandemic. So it was right before we experienced COVID. And we didn't find, the way we went with COVID did not follow the script of that pandemic. So we should write an analysis report about that. And then recently we did ransomware, because we're seeing ransomware more and more target physical spaces, especially around operational or occupational technologies. We do a lot of analysis reports, as I've mentioned before. We have a data sharing agreement for data from passive DNS, which is a really good source of information as you're looking for ways, looking for more intelligence, right? That you can see things coming and going from your institution on network traffic and make some decisions around that. And then we participate with EDUCAUSE and Internet2 in developing a vendor assessment toolkit. So it's, I think, and there's information on our public website about it. There's 2 versions of it. There's one that's a 250 question assessment questionnaire that you would give the vendor, and then they can fill it out. And then the other one's 100. So that's the 100 questions. So that's the light version. So you can kind of pick and choose what you need for your policies and your purchasing requirements and use that accordingly. And those are publicly available too. They might not be as relevant, some of the questions in your industry, but a lot of them are compliance based, so they're relevant to everyone. I did want to cover some, and I've got weird formatting here with that capital C at the end of InfoSec. But I wanted to provide some other recommended resources outside of the REN-ISAC, sort of what we know people use quite a bit. EDUCAUSE has a lot of great information around their what they call their budget conscious InfoSec. So that's really a good way to get started if you are you don't have many resources. They also have an information security guide, and that's very focused with toolkits and templates and examples like that you can dive into, and you can get to it from this library. So that's a really good resource. I like Incident Response Consortium. If you're just planning incident response or you need to rewrite your playbooks, they have sample playbooks and it's laid out really nicely. There's a lot of information, so you have to take some time, but it is pretty easy to get into. The US government has a cybersecurity awareness hub. So security awareness, ongoing issue, looking for resources on that is always key, and that's a good place for it. Have I Been Pwned is also really good. At least you can always look up your account, but you can set up filters to look for anyone with your organization's URL and then get reports and alerts on that. CISA is a good resource. They're really stepping up their game, and they're providing things that are timely and informational and available to a broad audience. And then the last thing I would mention is your IT vendors. They have a lot of free services or a lot of services related to what you're buying, the products you're buying from them. Microsoft has great information. So, definitely use them and ask them questions and try to get things from them, because you'll find that they are just a wealth of resources too. Maybe your routing company or whomever has some good resources. So definitely chase that down as well. That's really all we've got. Happy to take questions now.
Hey, Kim, I've got a personal question here. Wanted to ask yourself or Michael to expand upon K-12 and how that fits in here in terms of your member base or receiving services and things like that. I know that some of our registrants are a part of the K-12 community. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, we K-12 is not part of our community, but we helped the folks who set up the K-12 ISAC. I think it's called K126.org. We helped them. They used a lot of the knowledge that we had gained over the years to set that up, and we're still helping them. We're figuring out ways they can do their own assessments. So you can't be a member of the REN if you're K-12, but definitely go to the K-12-6 and talk to them, or the multi-state ISAC is another great resource there that we work with quite a bit. So we're looking for always happy to help out if those things come to us. Michael, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The folks that work at K-12-6 are really good. They've got some very, very smart people who've been in specifically K-12 for a long time and really understand that landscape. And so getting plugged in with that group, they run an open Slack, I think, called Building Security People for OPSEC EDU type stuff that would be good to engage with if you can get plugged into that. So they've got very good resources. Excellent.
Thank you. And then another question, a follow-up question for Michael. I know you mentioned that the REN-ISAC is the official CSIRT organization was that for incident response? Could you talk a little bit more about what REN-ISAC would do if a member organization came and said, we got hit, help us out? Could you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, the CSIRT that we operate at is for U.S. higher education, which means it's a public goods, public service that we perform. It's not just for REN-ISAC members specifically. And that ties back into those notifications that I mentioned. So if we get information that we think is useful to a U.S. institution, but they're not a member, that's not going to stop me from doing my best to try to reach out and get a hold of somebody at that institution that could make use of whatever info we got. And so that could be in terms of, it looks like there's compromised credentials, those compromised hosts. Recently, we've been working with some partners that they're tracking a very new threat adversary in the ransomware space, and they've got very good visibility into what's going on in the malicious infrastructure, and they're finding things that look like they're infected. And many of these are not REN-ISAC institutions. And so we're still doing our best to try to get contacts for those and reach out to them and tell them, hey, here's all the information we've got. This is your source IP address that's beaconing out. This is the time. This was the host name in case you're using outgoing NAT or PAT, right? So the IP address may go to a bunch of different machines in your own private network. We're doing everything we can to try to get them, again, that actionable, relevant, timely information that would be useful to them, regardless of their membership status. Okay, excellent. And then after notification there, when they're trying to do their response and recovery, is there any kind of added services there that REN-ISAC contributes to that portion of their response? Yeah, I will say that today we don't get a lot of inquiries for that. And that's because partly the US has this idea of rugged individualism, right? We're not quite like Europe, where the national research education networks are tied together and they all use the same backbone for the network. And there's a lot of visibility at the federal level to be able to orchestrate and respond to events. So because we don't really have any insight visibility directly in their network, and it would be unusual or unique for an institution to want to provide that to an outside organization, we just don't get a lot of asks for that today. Having said that, if those folks come back to us and say, For example, like a non-member institution gets information from us in a notification and they say, I just don't know what to do with this, right? Some of these are very small institutions. They do not all have the same resources. We have a very diverse community in higher education. It really runs the gamut from these tier 1 research universities that we often think of to these very, very small institutions that are still faced with the same threats and against the same threat adversaries that everybody else is, right? And so if one of those gets a notification from us and they come back to us and they say, I don't even know where to start, can you help me? We're happy to provide guidance and help kind of move them in the right direction and say, here's some references, here's some guides, here's some documentation. What I would do is start here. So for example, if I've got a host inside my institution, it's beaconing out and I just don't even know where to start, I would track down that host inside my network if I was the system admin there. And if it's a Windows box, which most of them, if they're ransomware or had the malware on them I would start with netstat, right? I would go, even if I had no logging, no special detection in my network at all, I would go straight to that box and run netstat space -ANO, and I would look for that IP address that it was supposedly talking to, and I would figure out what process it was tied to, and then I would start my investigation from there.
Perfect. That's all the questions that I have. I want to give a minute more for our attendees to put any questions in the chat. While we're waiting for those questions, Kim or Michael, is there anything additional you wanted to touch on or expand upon?
I would expand on what Michael was just talking about. We don't do incident response, but we know there are different levels of maturity in people's incident response. So the peer assessment, we do get a lot of requests for a special assessment on incident response, and we get a lot of special requests for the pen testing. So we know that is front and center to a lot of people's needs. So we're always looking at that, in addition to how Michael described sort of the, ad hoc help me, how we do that. We're in the business of helping and information sharing. So we're going to do our best that we can. When we send these notifications out, they have a lot of good information in them too. And some people have told me that they said, oh, I just read what I needed to do and I did it exactly as it was described, So we do try to keep that how can we help mentality with everything we put out to folks.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions come up in the chat here, so I think we'll close it out. We're right about where we wanted to finish in terms of time. So thank you, everybody, for joining today. Just a couple closing remarks. Another thank you to Kim and Michael for joining us for the webinar today. We did record this session and it will be up on our YouTube page. You can search for the National Cybersecurity Center to see the recording there. We're also going to send it back out to everyone that registered for the event today. If you have any questions, Kim, can you put back up that slide real quick with your email address on it, just so we have that up there one more time? I'm putting you on the spot here, putting you on the hot seat to move quick.
And also just
there we go.
It's hit the recording. I did put in chat the www.k126.org. That's the letter K, the numbers 1, 2, and then the word 6, SIX.org.
Perfect. All right, we got their email addresses right up here. So take a note there if you want to reach out with any questions. Otherwise, I will end the session today. I hope everyone has a great rest of your week. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Take care.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you all.
Bye.